Hello to our 7 Oakland Greens viewers. My name is Vicente Cruz and I am the event coordinator for the Oakland Greens. I am also your facilitator and director for the virtual town hall events that we have. And for September, we're going to be talking about rights in the workplace. Something that is very, very close to my heart and also is a big deal. You know, labor struggle definitely ties into social justice, even whether it be racism or smashing patriarchy as well. So one of some of my questions and things that I would like to cover tonight would be like, where do your rights stop? You know, the rights that are granted to us just by natural order of things, and where do those rights end in trying to navigate a capitalist system. Again, let me also, in the introduction, say we have, this is 2 more events, this one, and then we have the KPFA elections, sort of with Tracy Rosenberg, which happens on October 30th, and then our last event for the virtual town hall series, which would be, what are the effects of Sesta Fosta? One of the things that the Oakland Greens have been really on for at least pushing to the forefront always in our social media or anytime we discuss things is women's rights. And along with those is about sex worker rights. So here we are years into after the so-called trafficking laws are passed, but it doesn't seem that it's stopping any women from getting trafficked. You have First Nations on this continent where the young girls are going missing, you know, like easily once a week or just being murdered. And again, now the talk because of some YouTuber about how, again, it's swept under the rug, which I don't know why anyone would be surprised about that. We still live in a very racist, sexist, homophobic, patriarchal, horrible capitalist system, corrupt. And I've said often that I feel that even, it's not just about capitalism in itself, but it's more about control, because I do believe that they could have the system itself could operate and everyone, we don't need tent cities. We could have, you know, all of the services that we need, and Bezos can still shoot his like penis rocket into the space. Their lifestyle would not change, but it seems to be more about control. So I encourage everyone to come and say that. And again, I am Vicente Cruz, and one thing will also, disclaimer, the Oakland Greens, often all of these opinions that we will say are our own, and some of them collectively as our local Green group, but a lot of times don't align with the state, county, and also national party. So we want to make that true. And a simple example of that is the Oakland Greens are not pacifists. We definitely talk about you know, defending yourself, and as much as we don't like violence just for violence sake, we have often talked about in our meetings the fact that, you know, maybe in some cases, if there was, you know, to fight back, that things would change. And I personally also have put into those discussions that usually anytime at rallies or when these police are getting so violent, there's way so many of us that they couldn't even deploy in time. And if we would just surround them with love, the police would have no recourse but to, I guess, do a more of a England over India and just slaughter tons and tons of people like Kent states everywhere, which also, as horrible as it is, may just push things right along too, right? Just shocking people seems to be it. So remember that. With that, I will start the conversation off and ask the question as the main one I think that I would like to discuss first is, where or do the rights that are just granted to us within nature stop in the workplace? Does anyone have even a simple yes or no answer on that? You can use the raise the hand feature. I mean, this is all kind of family here, I think. I'm not, you know, we don't have to do introductions. There may be one, but if you, in the chat, I do pay attention there. You can use the raise hand feature. If you have your camera on, you can raise it. And with that, I see Jen and Michael, please, again.
Well, a long time ago, when I was first getting involved in the radical movement, a comrade from the 30s wrote a piece that I about this. Basically, the piece was, the Constitution stops at the workplace door, and that is That's always been true. It is still true, you know, decades later. And the fact is that people have very few rights at the workplace.
Yeah.
And that, you know, and that unfortunately has not changed very much. As since I was a public servant, I had a bit more leeway, but not much. And it's just it's a sad commentary on the labor movement, that the labor movement has not really put much of a dent into that statement. Or
Thank you. You know, that is, I would agree with everything you said there too, that for some reason. Now, I guess the next one is, should it? Or should it be? And I'll answer that. I think you do not lose your right just because you walk into the workplace. I do also believe that there are some inappropriate things that you don't do. But again, that's about, seems to me, natural order of things too. It's like there's certain things that you would separate when you're in a professional setting versus a familiar setting. As much as I even use profanity in my language, whenever it comes out, it just does. These virtual town forums definitely have a lighter, a more familiar setting, not just because of the regular cast of all the Oakland Greens who show up for these, but that's the intent of the event. Now, there's other events we have, like the one we did with Rosa, the one coming up with Tracy, where it is more of a formal setting and the language changes. But I just think that's about being polite in itself. And again, I not because someone told me to, it's just what I think. So my second question to everyone here is, should rights end at the workplace door, or should you be able to keep them?
Well,
Good, Dale, please, yes.
Well, I think it depends on concrete examples that we discuss here, because that's the way we can, get our hands around this. For example, I'll give you one. On a college campus at a big state university, does, for example, a student have the right to fly the Nazi flag in the window of his dorm, the dormitory? That actually happened where I was teaching. And oddly enough, that individual came to us, the Brazos Valley American chapter of the American Civil Liberties Union. And it was the wrong group for him to come to, because we decided basically that if he wanted to wear the Nazi swastika on his socks, on a part of his t-shirt, we might consider it. But to fly it there and make everybody kind of nervous who might be seeing it, no, we wouldn't offend him at all. But again, I just make this point to say it helps with concrete examples to see where these rights stop or where they end.
I agree with that, and we'll do that and start with this one. So for me personally, you get to wear the t-shirt, socks, tattoos, but you also get to have to deal with the consequences of that. You don't get to fly it outside of your window. You can have it in your room. And my reason for that is sort of the same thing around Confederate flags and how I always try to use humor, because if I don't laugh, I'll just cry all the time. But I always look at it as the difference between a rally where somebody says, I don't like niggers, versus let's go hang that nigger, right? Okay, one is free speech and the other is not. You can chalk it up to Ninth Amendment, to anything that starts to cringe on me, or like you said, Dale, make people feel uncomfortable. No, you do not get to do that. And specifically for that flag, because it has the whole connotation of, ovens and the camps that, then just all of the World War II bullshit, right? All the shit. So you don't get to do that. And that's how I always felt the same way about the battle flag. That I thought that you should not do that. And then I see a 510. Yes, please go ahead.
All right, this is Greg. Yeah, sorry, I got knocked off the video again. But anyway, so to the question at hand, I think, what is trying to come up with a more general principle. And to me, it's kind of like the famous example of yelling fire in the crowded theater, that if, free speech stops where it becomes a imminent danger, I think is how they describe the situation with yelling fire in a crowded theater. You're provoking you're causing an imminent danger that way. You're not just talking about, free speech. And, so you could argue, I guess, that putting up a Nazi flag in the dorm window, is provoking some sort of incident. Could be, somewhat of a danger, and the same thing with saying, let's go beat up the black people, or whatever however you phrase it. So, I mean, is that kind of like a general principle we could say that we would use to distinguish between what would be free speech and what would be something that potentially could cause a major harm to people. So I think that's something that we can toss around and see if it can apply to whatever examples we might come up with. Oh.
I would definitely agree with that. That's exactly what it's like. Yelling fire, not where there isn't a fire in a building and causing people to get hurt. It does invoke that because of the Holocaust, right? We're not talking about somebody was wearing a symbol and they shot one person because they didn't like their hairstyle or their ethnicity. We're talking about, we're talking about the Holocaust, or like a Muafa against POAD folks, right? That's exactly what it's like. And sorry, you don't get to do that. But there's you have tons of other ways that you can display that. You're totally free to have that thought if you want to have it, right? But yeah, I also again believe that you are also don't get mad when someone comes up and punches you in the face. Right? I'm like, okay, somebody, it's like, and again, and it's not. That's right. I always try to take things like in the moment or in context. But if someone came to me and said, "Oh man, this person had a swastika tattoo and swastika shirt and swastika socks, and was walking across a college campus," and somebody just random came up in front of me, and I would have to ask them, "Why do you sound surprised when you say that?" It should have been more of a statement rather than like, a question, like, "Oh man, dude was walking around with swastika." Somebody came and punched him in the face. It's like, "Oh yeah, of course they did," right? And that's all they did. So that would be my question too. That's all they did? Really? Only one punch? Just a smack and kept on trucking? Yeah, all right. I would have thought been something else. If there's nothing on that one, here's one where I think I might take a different stance than everyone else. So, but it's kind of the same thing. So there's right here locally in Berkeley at some hot dog shop across from the Berkeley campus on Claremont, who happened to be at Charlottesville, the Tiki Torch rally. They saw him, his picture, like when famous, he came back and got fired. I don't think that person should have been fired. I was like, oh, well, were they spitting in, Muslims' food or Jewish people's food? Were they giving them, not service that the company liked? Because what someone does on their off time, just as far as free speech, not yelling fire in the non-burning theater, but just free speech, should not, if it has not affected their work, they should not have been fired. Now, I also, full transparency, I'm sensitive to that because that happened to me, right? One of the reasons, like, I didn't get a contract back is because I was way too social justice oriented in my teaching, even though the parents loved me and the students loved me, and I had an incredible success rate. The company, and it ties into a corrupt capitalist system, because it wasn't a problem until the nonprofit started getting, these multi-million-dollar donations from these large companies like New Balance and Mattel. All of a sudden, it became an issue. of having someone who happened to be, who ran for office, who was involved in, civil disobedience and direct action, and who was on getting interviewed and talking shit, So, so the question again was, so for those people who, and this is happening all over the place, the woman who called the cops on the brother and things like that. And I don't know, that's a tough one, because it does say if you've been convicted of a crime. And definitely you wouldn't make a cashier out of someone who has a long history of stealing. That's just common sense. So when I see Michael, I see your hand again, please go ahead.
Well, I think there's two different issues here. One of them is a sort of general free speech attitude, but the question of workplaces is much more restrictive. In other words, so the question is who gets to decide in the workplace? It's the boss gets to decide what speech is allowed. That's a different question than the question of whether I like it or. So I mean, I think you have to be careful and make a distinction between those, what happens on the job and what happens in society as a whole. Over.
Right, and I would put that into regulation, like in actual legislation and all that too. But I also agree too, like you couldn't wear the swastika shirt and socks or expose a swastika tattoo in your workplace, right?
Right.
You don't get to do that.
Right.
But if you went to the rally, I don't, depending. And again, it's the same thing too. Well, if you're threatening people and like it becomes like, oh, well, now I'm worried that you're going to be a danger to the other employees. Again, that's different. And maybe that is the real answer per se, is that it has to be taking every individual item. You can't have a whole blanket and say, oh, well, it's going to be like this. Because we need to see, well, like Dale said, what context is it in, right? Are you hanging it outside your window? Is it just inside where just you see it? Is it just on your body and covered up again? Well, you see it, unless when you're out with your Nazi friends. But is that, so which is it and when does it go? And also, if you're not following like the standards that the employer sets up.
Right.
Too, in those things too. But again, same thing. The employer doesn't get to say, well, okay. And actually, on that one, I'm different too. So like there's the gay cake issue. I think that was a small enough business where if you didn't want to make a cake for LGBTQ plus community, fine, have fun with that, because you obviously have no idea of what the stereotypes are and how much money is in that fucking community. So if you're trying to navigate a corrupt capitalist system, you just kind of yourself poorly, because there's a lot, you're just denying money. It just made no sense to me, but have at it.
Yeah.
But if you're a publicly traded company, like these multinationals, no, you do not. You do not. Because again, now you're publicly traded. You're not this private entity anymore. Right, you're global. You're too large, and those companies get a lot of bailouts. And so no, you don't get to discriminate. Go ahead, Michael.
I'm just going to say, with the question of the bakery, there's public accommodations. I don't think they do have that right, because of public accommodations. People have the right to pick a business and patronize it if they want to. You cannot say as a business, I don't want your business. That's what the civil rights movement was about, and we won. We won that, at least temporarily. So I don't believe that businesses have the right to say, go away to a customer. And that's my personal opinion on that.
So then, and I want to see if I get answers from Orlando and Greg and everyone too. So then you think that a Nazi group should be able to go to It's All Good Bakery and It's All Good Bakery has to make like the swastika cheesecake and the swastika sweet potato pie? Do they have to do that now because of that?
That's a tough one. I'd have to think about that for a bit.
Dale?
By God, I have to think about it too.
Oh, all right. Orlando?
I don't know, mine, it's kind of different for me because when I was in prison, we had Nazi lowriders, we had skinheads, blacks. So when we had to go to the chow hall, like the place of their business, and I'm going to get my lunch, and this person got a swastika on his neck with lightning bolts between it colored in. I mean, he killed the black person, and we had to use our freedom of speech. So I understand on both sides of it. It's more of understanding who you dealing with and the circumstances. When it comes to the work field, I can see it on both sides. Blacks working for whites, low paying job. You at Walmart. We don't like the way how you discriminate us. We're gonna steal all your stuff, and then you're gonna go out of business. Vice versa for the Hispanics, the same culture, but I think it's just the education within those groups to understand those biases.
Can also be full disclosure too that hypothetical scenario I said, we know it would actually happen if the motherfuckers try to walk into a bakery. Does everyone know the history of that particular bakery too? Was the first Black Panther headquarters back in the day. So,
yeah.
And they still are very like if you want your holiday pie, you better get in quick because it's really good food and they get booked really, really quickly. I think that, and as well as it wouldn't happen, it'd be a whole different video than the ones you always see on the internet where there's these people just arguing. I'm like, yeah, but it would be a very short video if someone tried to do that. But I think they totally have the right to refuse service. And I would say that other business was small enough too. And I don't want to give you my business anyway. I don't want to give you my money. Right. I don't want you. I'd rather you go out of business, which is what ended up happening. Right. Because it wasn't just the LGBTQ plus community, which was probably small in that southern town. But surprise, he did find out that not everybody thinks the same way. And they were like, oh, okay, well, then I won't shop there either, right? I'll vote with my dollar on that. And he had to start GoFundMe's, and they probably are completely out of business. So how'd that work out for your house? Should have kept your mouth. Sometimes you should just keep your fucking mouth shut. Do you have some to Orlando again? No. Let me see then. I want to ask my specific one. So what about political activism? So not on company time, and I'm gonna do that one next, but off of company time, somebody goes to a sit-in and they blockade, courthouse and get arrested. They do not get convicted, but they spend, a couple hours, say they spend a weekend in jail. They miss work one of those days, come out, what happened, they tell them what to do, and I was at a protest and I got arrested and they didn't let me out in time and I didn't get calls or whatever. Do they get fired? Is that something that they're, oh, you didn't represent? And then I have a B question on that, but do they get fired? Is it a write-up? How would you do what do you think a company should deal or an employer should deal with that situation?
I knew in cases to where a lot of people didn't get involved because if they called a felony, their job would say, hey, you got a felony. So if it was a misdemeanor, this is not like being racist, but we knew when the protesters, when we go to Lawrence Livermore Lab for science, and every year to do it, we knew that everyone was from 90 years to 80 years old was going to go to jail that weekend. But we knew that they didn't have felonies, so they'd come home. Those who had felonies, they wasn't on the front line. They just participated. So just my sense. Take.
Right. And they shouldn't.
Mm-hmm.
We used to say that too. Don't, if you're already got a case, don't be messing around with this stuff too. Anyone else have an idea? What are their ideas on that?
Mhm.
Nothing? All right, well, I'll move on to the next one. So what about teachers who do it with their students? Public school teachers who decide for the Women's March on October 2nd, where we'll be at, with that shameless plug. Does that teacher then, is that teacher allowed to do that in the workplace? Take their students to the rally? No one gets arrested, right?
Well,
Peaceful rally, they march, they go home.
not without parental permission.
Oh, well, yeah, okay, I'm sorry. We assume it's parental permission, but not school permission.
Right.
So does the teacher get fired because it had actually, students were all safe and they had parental permission, but for some reason the school board,
Well,
no, we don't want you going to a woman's
no, you
march.
can't do that.
No, okay, that's easy. Is there any other, Dale, because you as a college professor, did you have instances of professors going to protests and then having retaliation from the administration?
We didn't really have a problem with that. The big assemblies that we had to protest the Iraq War, for example, there's not only are there spaces on campus for free speech, but also we can go to any part of the campus as long as we're not blocking somebody from getting into the library or something, and do the protest without any problem. Our biggest issue that came up was if your employer, which was Texas A&M University, issues you an email address, which they did, and then comes out with a statement saying, you will not use that email address for political purposes, nor will you use that email address to make money. And we fought that, arguing that the email address was comparable to a mailbox, a United States postal mailbox. And what went into it was basically yours. You own that. You could open those letters, so to speak, and that's your private business. That was a sticky one.
Yeah, because I'm like, if it's a official one, if it's your own, like your Gmail account, I mean, that's fine. You just happen to be checking it at work. I'd probably have to side with the college on that one. But then on the other side, I think they should be able to blockade without any retaliation, right? Civil disobedience is a tactic that has been used by social justice activists, for a very, very, very long time. And unless you want a straight up, civil war, like, okay, well, this is the tactic that we have, is to disrupt normal business, whatever that may be. Yes, I see a hand raised.
Yes, let me just say this goes back to something I dealt with as a union steward when I was working, and what it was in many workplaces I worked for the state of California, and many times this various agencies or supervisors and managers would try and restrict the use of state phones to people, and I actually filed grievances on this. Basically, my attitude was that employees are not prisoners, and therefore it was perfectly reasonable, for example, for a man to call his wife, or a wife to call her husband, or something to tell about something about revolving around the children, or picking up dinner. People did that all the time, and that was okay as far as I was concerned. And basically, occasionally there were battles, but we usually won on that, and at least where I was working. And I think in general terms we would win those kind of things, but it in many workplaces it's a battle.
And 510-644, with their hand up, go next, and then I see Dale after that.
Yeah.
We
Yeah,
did, yeah, we fought the same battle at the
Oh, hold on,
university.
Dale. Hold on, Dale. Hold on. It's the 510 number, please, first.
Oh, excuse me.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's Greg. Hi. Yeah. So going back to the email, not so much the question of, you know, did you have the right to use the email address to make money or to engage in social protests, whatever. My observation has to do with whether the employer has the right to spy on your email. My understanding is that a bunch of employers now are monitoring, you know, the actual messages that employees use, as well as, you know, they're putting up surveillance cameras and monitoring, you know, the physical movements of employees. And I think Amazon has something where they have some kind of meter that, you know, that times the employee, how fast they walk and all this other stuff. I mean, you know, how far can this surveillance go for employers? Do they get to surveil every single thing you do? It seems to me to be really getting out of hand.
Well,
Over.
Great. Dale, you're next, please.
Well, let me respond to Greg, because that did happen at the campus where I worked. They did say that they had saved every email for 7 years back. I think after 7 years expired, they were, you know, not saving it. But that's probably not the case now, because with the storage capabilities, you can keep probably everything. So as far as I know, even now, they're saving the emails. They exist.
well,
That's why when we write an email, or when we did use our university account, we assumed that it was for the world to see.
Well, you know, you should always assume that now, not just in the workplace, just everywhere. Yes, Michael.
yeah, just a couple things. One of them is that the employers would try and regulate what, for example, there were occasions when people were took too long in the bathroom, you know, and especially when I worked for the phone company, because it was everything was electronic. I was a telephone operator for a time in my life, and if I wasn't picking up calls would come automatically into the equipment, and as soon as you got off one call, another one would pop up, and if that you weren't answering them, you know, then there was a problem, and people were disciplined for that. Basically, the phone company was just a nightmare. What they did was that they monitored the calls the average office-wide calls per hour, and if you were less than the average, then they could harass you or fire you or you know, discipline you in various ways. And eventually, the result of that, of course, is that the calls per hour average kept rising, because the people who were below it were being harassed. So it was just an endless treadmill for the employees, and so that was one experience I had. But the other example I was involved with was union stuff. That is, using the office email system or you know, to spread new union news. We wanted to advertise the union was having a meeting, so I would send it to all the you know, and there were battles about that. They tried to get us to stop using office email for union purposes. Now they didn't win that either, but occasionally there would be somebody would get the bright idea, well, let's crack down on that. And eventually we beat it back mostly, but it was it was a constant battle. It's not fair to say, it's not unfair to say it was not every minute, but every day or every week or something, there would be a battle over this. So it's to me, it goes back to what I started with, which is that the Constitution does not apply to the workplace door. It stops. None of the rights guaranteed to people by the Constitution, especially the Bill of Rights, all that stops at the workplace door. Everything's a battle.
And that's a mistake, in my opinion.
It's a crime. It's a crime.
Right. And you should never do that as well. So so here's one, and that I thought of too, is, so now in many states, cannabis is legal. So you had mentioned, Michael, and that it is completely acceptable in most places, and should be, to use although now, right, we all use our phones, but let's go back to just email, to use a company email to say, oh, hey, honey, I'm going to leave a little bit early. Do you want me to go and pick something up, right? Hey, mom, I'm on my way home. Do you want me to pick something up, whatever,
Right.
And to use that. So now, at the same time, in that shopping list, could we now add, hey, also, could you please stop by the cannabis store, and I want an eighth of flowers. I would love some topical, and I need a CBD. Does that now, since
It's legal.
once it becomes legal, that it should be, everyone would agree that, yeah.
Right. Then it's just it enters the realm of conversation, yay or nay, but there's nothing special about it once it's legal.
And Greg, please go ahead.
Okay. Well, I suppose that if we say that the employer, has certain rights over the workplace, and I guess you could argue that the work email is included in the workplace, and I guess when Michael was at the phone company, the equipment at the workplace that was monitoring how many calls he took and whatever. Okay, that's the workplace. But does the employer also have the rights to certain things having to do with you when you're no longer at the workplace? My understanding is some employers require that your credit report that your credit report must be that they have the right to examine your credit report. Do they have the right to examine your medical records? Do they have the right to get your Facebook and email passwords and examine your personal Facebook account and your personal email? I mean, my understanding is some employers are requiring all that stuff. And that's not to do with at the workplace. This is, your personal situation. So how far does this go in regards to stuff that's not at the workplace?
Well, I think even without requiring the passwords or anything, people are Googling you. When you send in a resume, the first thing they do is Google your name. They don't look at the resume. They just put it in Google and see what comes up, which goes into also having the technological skills to operate these devices, to have privacy, and social media, to have privacy settings, so that people can't view, because they do judge. And we've created this society, and I still will use a collective we in that. We've created this society where we're very judgmental, and it is really, really hard to get at. If you're not putting in serious shadow work on yourself, you will never be able to even realize, to even comprehend what your prejudices are. But it's the same thing when we go back to, so how did they get busted on January 6th? Motherfuckers was posting it all on their Facebook page. bragging and shit, right?
Well,
And
people saw them and turned them into the police.
yes, yes. And now on that one, yeah, motherfucker, you gotta get fired, right? That's it goes back with that's a fucking felony crime, man. It'd be like you just running up in my house and trying to put shit all over my wall. Yeah, motherfucker, you getting fired. You're lucky if you getting out the house, but but still, that is something you do. But I don't think it needs to go into the realm of, again, because so the people who, if you didn't go busting up into the Capitol and you just happen to believe all that bullshit that they're telling you, okay, yeah, you don't have to get fired just because you were there. Even I would even go as far as to where there's people who, well, the lady, oh my God, there's so many examples. The lady in New York City, where it's part of the Central Park that's like for bird watching and you have to keep your dogs on leash. She didn't, and then she calls the cops and says that, and that one actually you may get fired too, because that also is actually kind of a crime, right? I do believe that. I mean, I know filing a false report is. But, you could also make the case that calling any police officer on POAD folks is, it can be a death sentence no matter what it is.
Right.
But so maybe a better example would have to be, oh man, I'm trying to think. Well, I thought of one where they were at some rally and they just called someone a nigger. And then they got fired. Oh, the one I was thinking of, San Francisco, where the another POAD folks, in this case, it would be Asian diaspora, in chalk on their own building of Black Lives Matter. And they came out with their Brazil plastic surgery face and started and trying to be like also posh and polite and everything. And then they lost all of their business or anything. And I'm like, fuck that. That was like on their own time. They were advertising it, fucking who gives a shit. The lady who called water, she has
Oakland,
a CBD. She lost like tons and tons of business and all that. I'm like, yeah, that's not, no. And I'm like, that's just, also, it seems like a crumb, really. So let's not tackle the actual system that creates this bullshit. Let's go after, oh, look, see, we're not a racist country because we took the white lady, right? No, I'm not. There's still too many tent cities I'm walking by with you all the time. No, that doesn't do it. That doesn't do it for me. I give a shit about those people and what they do or whatever. Again, you see it. If people choose not to buy it, okay, well then that's again, people voting with their dollar. And I advocate doing that as much as possible anyway, right? So I think that is important. And also in a sense where you're not shopping at certain places, certain workplaces, because of like at Amazon, like the surveillance and how much, you get, you got peeing in Gatorade and we know the stories. So no, we, Oakland Greens, when we have to buy like ink or anything like that, like anything, we never go through Amazon. We have, oh man, 2010 maybe was the last time when we first actually started needing to buy ink. And then it just got to be, no, it's not. And also, I think it supports workers when they're trying to unionize, right? I mean, they're like, oh, why would I give you money when you're union busting and shit like that? So I think that is important. But yeah, so I'm kind of, and that's probably the anarchist coming out. I was like, it depends on the situations and what I think is appropriate and what is not. But going back to Greg's question, like how deep does it go? They're definitely Googling you all the time. That's the first thing anyone does when you send in a resume, right? It's just like the same thing where if they see a name and in their mind it seems ethnic, but they don't even look at it. But if they changed it to like Jane Smith, all of a sudden they get the call back and it was the same person.
Same resume, just a different name.
Right, just a different name, right? That I did that specifically.
Oh yeah.
Same thing happened. Place, but then that tied into one of my relatives, well, one of my family, said, do you really want to work at that place? Right. At the time, it was just convenient. And
Unfortunately, you need a job. I mean,
got to navigate the capitalist system. Well, I am not shy about my struggles. Also, I think everyone is navigating a corrupt capitalist system. But I also, again, being always very open, that I have like an incredible support system that most people do not have.
oh, yeah.
And I know for a fact from my relatives, like my maternal side family, all that comes because of what I do. If I was just like that's kind of how I can measure myself, because if I get their help, that means, I must be doing something good. Because if I was, sorry, I'm coming back. If I was just, fucking off and, I've got relatives that are crackheads, right? They don't get that much family support, unless they want to go to rehab or some shit, right? But no one's just tossing them money. So back to the initial question. So like even Michael said, where it is the norm now that the rights do stop at the door.
It's been the norm forever.
Right.
It's not something new.
Right. Well, that's that's really kind of what union, started way back in the 20s. And
Yeah, right. Yes.
and even, what was it, Dale, you had mentioned that you just rewatched, I guess The Great Debaters was on some thing you have already. I was watching, if you remember, like one of the movies nights, shameless plug, we go back in 2022, The Great Debaters. And in that movie, there's a scene where Denzel Washington is in the farmhouse talking, organizing the farm workers. And it wasn't just the African Americans ones, it was like the Dutch, it was everyone coming together. And that is what they feared the most.
Oh, absolutely.
Right? All of the workers, rather of ethnicity, religion, all coming together and demanding to be, we want to be also not just consumers, but producers of the conditions that we work in, and why they came in and like violently, right, busted up.
Mm-hmm.
Now they do it with just because the system is running itself, the monster's so big, they can just threaten to fire you because people are so desperate. There's always 100 more people willing to take the job, right? Which that's the biggest struggle to, or not the biggest, but that's a big struggle too, trying to get people to also work within their own interests. And I understand. I mean, I don't know how many those people have lived in their cars or ever been home. I've been there, I know it, but at some point, I think the greater good, the community has to come before oneself. Right. I mean, we're already, in my opinion, too, even just as a species on the planet, very, very small in the real big collective of things. Right. And climate change is showing us that. Right. How really small. Doesn't matter how much technology you fucking have. In fact, we rely too much on our smartphones and everything, because when that internet fucking goes down, right, that's it. Right. You're dark. It's all black. You can't see shit. Nothing.
You can't add 5 numbers together if you don't have your phone working.
Right. But so it's that too. So I don't think, and because of that, I think that it shouldn't. Your right should not end. I've also always had a struggle with that, but it usually not so much in the workplace itself, but afterwards, being on the outside, like, I saw you, a specific one. I saw you. Channel 2, talking and debating with Oakland NAACP, where I'm like, it wasn't enough. They didn't like what I had to say, and it had to be a meeting about it. I don't think that's true. But so what about like even fighting it within the workplace, not just for your rights as the worker, but are people allowed to wear a Green Party shirt to work? Or a Democratic Party shirt, Republican Party shirt? Where would you draw? Because see, I would also say that no, because there is still it's like, so, they think the big 3 alternative parties are small. The Nazi party is really, really small, the official political party. I would not think that is a correct shirt to wear against swastikas and stuff at work.
No.
But if someone had a Biden shirt or Trump shirt. Again,
It depends on whether you have to serve the public.
mm,
In other words, I've had both kinds of public jobs. One where I waited on people who came to the office.
mhm.
That they wanted me to wear a tie, to do that, which I refused. So I was given a job in the back, so I didn't have to fight about my clothing. But so there's really two standards. I mean, one of them is me and the public, but in these days, the situation is so bad for workers that if somebody doesn't like what you're wearing, regardless of what your job is, you can get into trouble at a workplace.
Well, and they wouldn't have to even be for that. They could say that you were sexually harassing someone, and
Oh yeah, of course.
that too. It happened to that woman where she was on vacation and she tweeted something. And by the time she landed, she had lost everything. And it had just gone crazy, viral, and all that too. Which again goes back to just remember anytime you put anything online. Again, 7 viewers that will watch this at Oakland Green Party YouTube. It's there for everyone, and it's always there. It never goes away. Never, ever, ever. It's somewhere. I don't know how we will keep being able. I don't know where we're going to put all this storage, but because eventually you figure it's got to run out.
Well, not with the cloud, it doesn't run out. As far as I'm not a big understanding. I don't have a lot of understanding about the cloud, but my sense is that the cloud greatly, if not infinitely, increases your ability to store things.
It does, but eventually, I think I don't know. That's a different topic. What I'm heard is that McDonald's workers no, because you're dealing with the public, but if you're in the office of McDonald's Corporation, it should be okay, right? Is that?
Well, it should be, but
Sorry, in the chat, Greg's like, "Ain't none of us going to get hired by anyone now." Luckily, most of y'all retired, and my job knows well in advance that I do and all that. I'm sorry. Go ahead. That made me chuckle. Go ahead, Michael, please. Sorry. Well, so I think actually, even in public, I think you should, again, if it is. You have to take it all as individual situations, but I feel that if it's a collective norm, you should be fine. People pretty much can collectively say, well, I don't feel comfortable with, something that says kill faggots,
right?
Something homophobic.
No.
Again, now that because that's again we're talking about actual violence.
Oh yeah.
Hang niggas, whatever, swastika that does it. The Confederate battle flag invokes all of those things. But if you just have, and you know what though, Trump is that just his because really he's just a label. I don't is getting close to being that symbol too. But let's say a Mitch McConnell, Ted Cruz. If you live in Texas, I am actually fine with that. I always caveat it with then you're also have to be okay with the reaction people give you. So if you are that worker and you got the Ted Cruz shirt on and you get that, or put it personal. So one of our outreach, we're supposed to be at work, but so I'm at work and if I have a Green Party shirt on and somebody comes up and does the, the norm, like, oh, you just give the Republicans elections. I don't really get to get mad at that. I mean, I can actually have the conversation with my coworker and all, but I don't get to get mad because I wore the shirt. And of course, that is a pretty common reaction to that. So I think that you have to have it both sides. You don't get to wear it and then people are supposed to be like, oh yeah, of course I disagree with you. No, that's not how that works, right? And that's always been me. And again, I also think that a lot of our views come from experiences. I have experienced this on the side of because of my radical politics costing me job, right? Or even having to have meetings onto it when I was teaching, right? I was out at work for a very long time. And so when partners would come and being non-aligned was having many parties around. If you I had to have a meeting, right, with the administration, with OUSD and my supervisor, which again, it was fine. I mean, they were like, oh, I don't, there was no, actually, that's one where there was really no policy for it. They didn't even know what the fuck to do with me at that point. But there was the one where I actually lost this battle when Lavelle Nixon was shot in his hometown, where I taught many of his relatives, and it was a non-relative, but one of my students whose family was very religious, a devout Christian family, and the student asked, and this is also where it came up, where we weren't sure if this was instructed from OUSD to have them. So there was a bunch of letters written to the cops by the students to the police officers' families, giving condolences. So my student wanted to know, well, why didn't anyone write to Lavelle Nixon's parents, right? Because I bet they're grieving just as much, no matter what he was accused of doing or did. And I was like, you're absolutely right. I was like, in fact, in interviews, his mother said that she felt like the system caused this and the system failed him. That he actually had a lot of potential, which happens often, which is another norm. So I'm like, well, my students wanted to write letters to Lavelle Nixon's parents. Well, of course they did. They knew all of his relatives. They were their classmates. They were their neighbors. So of course, yes, but that was like a big deal. And I will also, full transparency, I did the student who made, I posted the letters on my front door of my classroom for the world to see, and a parent got offended. Some parent got offended, and it became a big deal.
Of course.
I lost that battle. We did deliver the letters, but we had to take down the actual.
You couldn't post them, yeah.
We were not allowed to post them. I was not allowed to post them. I lost that battle, but I won the war, which is important.
Well, you educated the kids under your.
I argue they educated me. Like I said, I didn't prompt this. This was just this one. Again, I really believe it was because of their faith.
Your reaction to the kids.
Oh yeah,
educated the kids.
Yeah, oh yeah, of course. I was definitely, was steering the boat, as it were, along the river. Right. Got to navigate it and helping them and hoping that would translate in the future. Which so far I think seems like it did. My students are all pretty cool. They're all grown now. But again, as a whole, I think we've all somehow kind of failed, and we don't do it enough. I think I do kind of think that we're how do I say this? So where I'm going from is that how tickets sell, but then people like, oh, they'll come in for a little while and then they drop out, and it may scare them. When you talk about wiping the slate clean and starting over with new systems that would work for everyone and not just the few. People get fearful, I think, a little bit of having that control over their own lives.
Yep.
Right. It's scary, I think, to have to deal with those things and oh, what if it doesn't work? And then all of a sudden, oh my gosh, am I the one that's going to end up in the tent city now?
Right.
And admittedly, a lot of times it has to be worse before it gets better.
That's pretty bad now.
It is pretty bad now. And I go back to Mother Nature's taking care of all of it. She don't give a shit. She's like, you're tiny and I'll prove it. Watch, here comes a tornado in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. How you like me now? So, well, this has been actually turned out to be pretty good. I think we have, well, I will say I'm not surprised about where we all land and also where we land collectively and individually. I hope that October 2nd goes really well and we can motivate more people. I actually am pretty proud of the email that I sent out for this, just asking people to be, producers and Zoomers, and you cannot wait for this two-party system to come and do anything. It's not in their best interest. Why would they do it? Right.
Right.
And if we don't do it ourselves, and then not just electing people before profit candidates, but getting the alternative political parties, represent. We want the community's elected officials to represent the community, not corporations or businesses and any of those things. So if anyone doesn't have any other thoughts, no, then I will end. My name is Vicente Cruz, and you would have been watching and possibly some of the edits of the 2021 September virtual town hall that the Oakland Greens do every month. I will, and also caveat, remember that in 2022, we are going to try to start up our in-person events, and that would be the 2022 free dinner movie and discussion series. If you watch the video loop, and I will actually end up putting it up, where you can go to oaklandgreens.org. You can go to the social media, Facebook and Instagram. There is actual posts of the movie series is up. We're going to keep the Zoom series going too next year. We'll be doing 2 events a month starting in 2022. We're going to move the virtual town halls to an afternoon Saturday, kind of more of a relaxing, bring your own drinks and snacks and do it online. We do also believe, as the only reason, that we're probably in this pandemic and where we are now in this kind of weird limbo for a while. So we're going to keep going. I don't think Zoom is going away. We're actually planning to stream the discussion series of the movies. Of course, we won't break any copyright laws, but we do end up with some really good discussions. I've always said that one of the reasons that I produce is we have some of the most unique radical political thinkers in not just the city, but the county as well. And I really hope that we see all of you at more events, and I look forward to it. And, this ends our recorded session for the virtual town hall.